Welcome to the Crypto and Blockchain Talk.
Hello.
Hey.
Guten Tag.
Aloha.
Hola. Shalom.
Hello.
Namaste.
Ni hao.
Privet.
Hello.
Salut. Yassas.
Salve.
Ciao.
Bonjour. Our podcast talks about the latest trends in the worlds of cryptocurrencies and the blockchain. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Crypto and Blockchain Talk. I am so excited this week again, and I know I say that every week, but I really am super duper excited this week because I have none other than someone you may not even know his name, but you've definitely seen his comic books if you are in the United States or even in the United Kingdom, because I was in the UK when I saw this. But the guest this week that I have is Josh Blaylock. Josh is, and you know, this is the thing, do I call you founder? Do I call you the originator? I mean, I don't know what your actual position is in Devil's Due, but he is behind Devil's Due Comics. So without further ado, first of all, I want to say, Josh, welcome. We are just so honored to have you on here on Crypto and Blockchain Talk.
Thank you. It's great to be here. And I guess the answer to all those questions is yes. And okay. I'm going to have you do all of my intros from now on.
No worries. So wait a minute. So are you like the OG, or you're going into the NFT landscape? And, you know, we've done a number of podcasts on NFTs, but we've already had Jesse Dittmar, who's one of the most famous photographers in the world on. So he was my photography NFT guy. I wanted to know how he got into the space. Last week, it was Andrew from Tune FM, who, of course, he's doing music NFTs. And now here you come along, a pretty famous comic book series genre. I don't even know how you describe it, because look, I'm a huge fan of comics. I mean, you'll probably think I'm boring. I'm like Star Trek and Marvel, but we're going to get there in a minute. But I have to know, first of all, how did you get into the comics space?
Star Trek's never boring.
Oh my God, I love you already.
I just kind of plowed into it as a kid. I was out of impatience. I wanted to get into comics since I was little, and always knew I wanted to do that. And then in high school, I was working on stuff trying to get published, and just ended up self-publishing like the year I graduated, just by brute force. And then, as an aside, I had a day job. I went to art school for a couple of years, and then while I was, publishing, I was nationally distributing comics with this little label I had doing black and white comics. And I fell into a day job where I got to be the art director of this T-shirt company. It was just me, the two owners, and a secretary, and started a line of T-shirts with them that brought the 80s like comics and cartoon retro back, and no one had really done that before. So cool. Through that job, I learned licensing. I learned how to do the proposals, and I went and got the G.I. Joe license from Hasbro when that property had just been dead for almost a decade. And I had been self-publishing, but I went and I did a deal with Image Comics. Devil's Due Comics got the license. I did the deal with Image, and then it was a hit. So I kind of came out of nowhere, but it was one of those 6-year overnight success stories kind of things where I'd been self-publishing, and then finally I had this hit book, and no one had known who I was much prior to that.
So literally all your stars aligned. I mean, I find it incredible that, G.I. Joe. I mean, what little boy didn't have a smooth-crotched G.I. Joe to play with as a youngster? I mean, and the fact that you actually had the licensing. I mean, you had and you probably still have the licensing if you're, I'm sure you
we
do.
did for about 7 years. We ended up sort of getting outbid on a lot of those after nurturing those brands for almost a decade. But yeah, I mean, we made our stamp. We really changed the way independent comic book companies licensed comics. I mean, that wasn't as common of a thing back then at all. The success and the triggering of this whole 80s retro boom in comics after that really sort of changed the landscape of the indie scene. And then we kind of rode that, did a bunch of other licenses. That 80s thing is kind of funny, though, because we're going to talk about crypto. It was just one of the beginning of a long chain of instances where I saw potential in something and no one else seemed to get it. And I'm just kind of like shaking my head, just, screaming like to myself, like, why don't they understand how big this is going to be? Because back then the adults in charge that was like early 20s. And then all of the adults who were 30s and above just didn't get it. They just didn't understand why anything from the 80s was going to be something people would want. And if you were in the right demographic, you're sitting there like, are you kidding me? Has to work. So I just had the mentality of, I'll be the first to admit when something seems like I was wrong. I don't have any ego about that. But if I feel like I know it's right, I'm going to try to do it and just ignore everybody else. And crypto's kind of been one of those things where, it just clicked. The only mistake I ever made was doubting myself the first time around back in 2013.
Right.
And, I was a little too concerned that I might be drinking the Kool-Aid. And then I was like, damn it, I should have drank all the Kool-Aid I could.
Yeah. Well, listen, you'd have to join the long, long queue of people who really want to kick themselves in the behind. Because let me tell you something. If I had a dime for every person who said, I wish to God I'd followed my gut instinct, when this thing called Bitcoin first came out, oh my God, I would have more money than crypto is out there. I would have more money than the market cap right now. You're definitely not the only one. But before we get into this whole thing about why crypto and why NFTs, I love what you have. This new,
Thank you.
You have I don't know if it's a new series, but it's a featured item called Trailer Park Boys. I mean, you have some really interesting titles and what looks like, subject matter. Some of them, I'm not going to lie to you, I think they would be too scary for me because I'm pretty much a Hallmark girl. I do like sci-fi. I do like sci-fi, but like I said, also it's like Star Trek. But you're also the guy behind the AOC comic, which the funny thing is, of course, that hit the news big time. When that comic came out, oh my
crazy.
God. So let me ask you a question, and please be honest. Was that just a huge PR stunt, or was it like you're such a big AOC fan, you couldn't help but commit your talents that you have been honing since you've been a child on this woman? What's the real answer?
Definitely more, it was the latter. I don't mean that like blindly, because I'm really against people being like just being fans of politicians. Mm-hmm. But no, I mean, we were excited about the shakeup in the whole Democratic Party and this new representation of all of these people being elected with, obviously the squads, like the starring, whether they chose to be or not,
yeah,
or the stars of the whole thing. And we wanted to put something together. And had it been just a PR stunt, you would have seen a lot more political books from us. I just can't get my stomach to stay steady enough to do anything like that. I just don't. It has to be something I'm interested in.
Well, it's really funny you should say that. Yeah, because I'm one of a growing population who really just anything to do with politics now is making me just want to go and read a comic book or just do anything else, because really I find anything to do with politics distasteful. But because I've never actually picked up the AOC comic, so is it tongue-in-cheek or is it paying homage? What is in that comic?
It's everything.
Okay.
That's why it worked. That's why it worked, because we said it was definitely, in the overall tone was pro. When it comes to those kind of comics, I'll end up just drawing those little strips myself, and I just all of a sudden, I hope the readers don't feel like they're getting dumped on. I just pour into all these little analytical, almost like infographic comics, and I did a whole thing on called Where Dat Money At, which was all about the money printing of the last decade and where it's all going. And we had some Eisner Award-winning talent in there. I mean, Jill Thompson did a pinup for us. Dean Haspiel worked on the book, and a lot of names that if you're into comics, a lot of people will know those names. The anthology allows you to just get a bunch of awesome professionals on board for the project who normally wouldn't be able to commit to the longer term.
Yeah.
And also, nobody really wants to sit and read this long, fictitious comic story about a politician. But if you can celebrate that or comment on that, and you can just do a bunch of short little, snacks, that's a lot. That's the kind of thing that whether you read comics or not, if you're interested in that subject, you want to grab it. So we're doing the same thing with the book you mentioned, Trailer Park Boys. That's actually our first license in about a decade. They approached us wanting to celebrate the 20th anniversary of this Canadian TV series, which has really taken on a life of its own with all of the streaming available on Netflix and YouTube and everything else. So that's this huge legacy TV property now that we're coming out with the first comic in July. So we actually are just proving the little preview book today to send to the printer. And same thing, we're going to do the anthology format. We've got a lot of different artists coming in to participate on short stories because they're all celebrating that, their own personal takes on the TV show.
That's amazing. So hold on a second. What is your biggest title to date? Is it Mercy Sparks? Or what is the one where people line up and go, can you sign my comic book, man? What is the character that's really made you first and foremost known in the comic world?
First and foremost known would definitely be G.I. Joe, because I was like the guy that brought it back from the dead, and then it became this huge hit. So people know, and I wrote the book for the first 2 years and redesigned the characters, and so I was attaching myself to this huge brand that no one was doing anything else with in a way that the fans appreciated in animation or movies or anything else, and then that kind of kickstarted the new life into that brand. So that I'll always be known as that guy. But personally, my own creations, it would be Mercy Sparks, because I've got 2 big omnibus edition collections of that now. It's about almost 1,000 pages of comic. Starts out as a kind of funny, irreverent, supernatural / action story with a lot of humor in it. But it expands into this big epic story between heaven and hell and this person caught in the middle of it all. And we got a deal set up now with MGM Studios to develop that for a film. And that's the one where people show up dressed in costumes at the conventions. I would love it if that's what I become mostly known for over the next few years.
That is so awesome. I mean, seriously, that is awesome. I can't even imagine. I would love to be sitting in front of you during the preview, just watching your face and seeing this come to life for the first time. I'll bet you that alone is going to be a picture. You've got to get someone. You've got to pay. Listen to me here, right? You're only going to get one chance to. I mean, you need to get a photographer or a videographer to film you watching your own creations on the screen for the first time. You have to.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, of course you should. And let me tell you
Although everyone
something.
always tells me I'm hard to read, and they'll be like, why weren't you smiling? I'll be like, I was smiling.
Yeah, but you see, no one else, when you watch that, if you're ever feeling a little down, if you watch that, right, and you'll remember the thoughts going on in your own head. You know how to read yourself, but you should honestly spend the money, which will cost you almost nothing, to capture that moment, because that's something you'll want to relive. For real. And I got to tell you, I'm almost as excited as you are. I mean, well, actually, I'm probably more excited because, you're probably numb to it, and I'll tell you one thing. At the time that you were buying G.I. Joe, wasn't Marvel in bankruptcy?
Yeah, it was a wild time. If there's any one thing where I think we don't ever get enough credit, was we really brought a lot of people back into the stores because by triggering that whole 80s boom, because Marvel was coming out of bankruptcy. They were doing some really interesting, really cool stuff because, it was one of those things where once there's nothing to lose, the suits up top just say, I don't know, man, just go ahead and try some crazy shit.
Yeah.
And they were doing some really innovative things. And I hadn't really been a Marvel reader before that much. I was always a DC nerd. And I was reading all the Marvel stuff. And a lot of the stuff that movies are based on now came out of these, some of the experiments back then, like this line that they called their Ultimate Universe. I think that's a weird pattern in my life. When I started self-publishing for the first time when I was 18, the industry had just crashed. All my idols were these guys just a few years older than me who were, they were superstars at Marvel and DC, and then they were 18 to 22 years old making a ridiculous amount of money, and then they left to go form Image Comics, which disrupted the industry. So those are and everybody my age, those were our heroes.
Right, yeah.
So finally I'm able to break in and self-publish while the industry crashes right before that. And it was okay, well, we'll just figure out how to, do it. And then Marvel's over the years had been coming out of the bankruptcy, but then we had the .com crash and all that stuff, and getting that G.I. Joe license and kicking off the whole 80s retro boom brought probably at least a couple 100,000 people back into stores that had not read comics in a while. And I don't know, it's probably literally been about 1,000 times over the years. I've had people at my tables at conventions tell me, man, I gotten out of comics for years, and then I saw G.I. Joe was back, and I came in, and then coincidentally, Marvel had all this new, innovative, cool stuff going on, and then they said, oh, then I realized, then I got hooked on buying other stuff, and it got me back into comics. And 20 years later, they're still in. But then that book was a hit for quite a long time.
Jeez.
But I came up as an indie guy wanting to do my own comics I was always more into, I always read superhero stuff, but I never really liked to draw and write superheroes. And I never really I never really got into doing other people's characters very much, except for those like 80s things I grew up with. I never really was interested in pursuing getting the gig, drawing or writing Batman or anything. I mean, sure as hell I'd say yes to it if someone asked me, but it just wasn't what I pursued. The sci-fi stuff I actually like. I like to get into a lot of that. Like right now, there's 2 comics we have that I kind of had developing in the back burner for about 10 years until I finally pulled the trigger. One is the Encoded, which takes place in 2055.
Yep.
And it's as much as possible just really trying to visualize what the world's going to be like when we get this convergence of all this technology we're upon now. Then throw in some crazy stuff that happens that sort of disrupts things, so we have an excuse to add in some fun ninja androids and robots.
It does need to be made into a cartoon, but I saw like the video, and I'm going to put the link into the descriptions in the podcast, because I thought it was fantastic, because, you've got Bitcoin in there. You've got a story that's going on. I'll be honest with you. I was really hoping the characters were going to move on the page. So I have a feeling that is coming. I mean, it's the anti-hero story almost again. That's what it feels like to me. I mean, and I do love the image of the woman riding the cyborg hand. I thought that was
those are great. That's Joel Herrera does these amazing, like, old-timey looking pulpy covers, kind of almost like Norman Rockwell type of.
It is. It's like Norman Rockwell meets Liechtenstein meets something like Pinup Girl from the 40s. I mean, when I'm looking at the Encoded girls, I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, every guy in Bitcoin, every guy in crypto is going to be like wanting a poster of this.
Yeah. And we're that cover, people lost their mind over. We told the retailers that we were going to also be giving them this other cover for every copy they ordered as part of a promotion, and just the fans didn't really get the message from the retailers. So when it just appeared on the shelves, they just went nuts over that. And then that cover with that girl on the robot hand was going, I think someone paid $200 for it the week after it came out on eBay. And it leveled off to around, I think $25-$30. But for a new book, that's pretty awesome.
What are you kidding? That's more than fabulous. Actually, that's a pretty good segue over to like what I'm going to ask you now, because of course, what this podcast is about, because we are crypto and blockchain talk. I was going to do a special announcement actually at the end of this, but we just found out actually that we now have over 100,000 unique listeners to our podcast and radio station. So I'm really, really excited. And, so this is Crypto and Blockchain Talk. We talk about things that are crypto and blockchain. And the reason, obviously, besides you being a fabulous artist with, just an amazing collection that you are giving birth to through your own hands, you are actually going into the NFT space, and you are going to be debuting the Encoded series as NFTs. I don't know if it's the covers, and I was going to ask you about all these questions. I think I'm going to get all the questions out now so you can answer them all. So, oh my God, I have so many questions. I'm trying to figure out the order. Hold on a second. So I know that you have crypto rewards in the books. I don't know what blockchain you're using. I don't know if you have your own cryptocurrency. I don't know what images are going as NFTs. I don't know if you're actually going to have it where the person who purchases the NFT also owns the actual tangible item, so i.e. the actual artwork. So there's a lot of questions I have, and I think I'm going to now let you roll and explain all those things. And if you forget anything, I'll remind you.
Yeah, sure. I think I can handle all those.
I know you can.
Well, the one thing we did was I wanted to do this all along since even like I had a meeting about 3 years ago about the wanting to do something like this with like a crypto giveaway with puzzles and stuff in the book after it came out. So that's what we did. I wasn't really sure how to do it, and then until when NFTs really, became this thing that the public was all of a sudden talking about. Then I was like, okay, great. Now this really can have legs. After the book was released, which was already pretty much sold out, we just announced, hey, it's if you download the Aviva app and go scan the pages of the book, you'll reveal some clues that they'll lead you down the road to claim some free crypto. And right now that's going to be a free NFT. That'll be, people can choose to go claim that now, or they can wait until the gas fees drop a little bit.
And where do they get that NFT? How do they claim the NFT?
So you scan the book with the AR app, and then it will reveal, you have to scan the pages, and when you find the right page that's part of one of the clues, it'll activate, and it'll reveal a clue. You have to answer a question and follow the prompts, and it leads you down a little scavenger hunt. Now, if you're if you're from the crypto space, you're just going to roll your eyes with some of the questions, but hopefully you appreciate that we're not just giving away crypto, we're educating people. It's not that complicated. I'm not making it like super difficult for people. This works just as well on the digital comics, so they can go to comiXology.com and download the book there. But it's a way to reward the people who already have the book in hand. I've contacted everyone on our email list who's bought the book, and we contacted everyone on Kickstarter. There's one perk too. If you supported us on Kickstarter when we launched this project, you don't even have to solve the puzzle. You'll just get to claim the NFT, as a thank you for having supported us.
Oh, that's nice.
That's one of the things that really excites me so much about what's possible with all of this is the ability to reward your long-term fans. So when you get into doing things like, besides NFTs, doing tokens and all kinds of stuff, I'm really just trying to think how, while embracing the people who are already into this, how can we sort of set things up for our previous fans from the, analog world,
yeah.
Whether they're interested in this or not, and just set it up so for those of them who do finally migrate into like the modern tech here, these rewards are just sitting there waiting for them. And, hopefully it builds some real loyalty and appreciation with everyone. And it's a fun little contest. The book's called The Encoded, and you just scan the pages with the Aviva app. I can't really say any more than that because it's literally just scan the pages, then do what it says.
Right. Well, okay. So let me ask you this then. So are you going to end up having your own blockchain and then putting your NFTs on your own blockchain, and even going one step further and issuing your own crypto? Because I would think for somebody like yourself who has this massive library of images, and now, you're going onto the big screen. So if anything screams, I have a blockchain, invest in these. I mean, you would be literally issuing your own galleries to your fans. And the other thing is that, you could actually do a lot more in terms of your old school fans. And let me explain what I mean by that. I've been in this industry for a while. I've written 7 books on crypto and blockchain for everything from little kids all the way up to adults. And it's really quite interesting because I've done a lot of research. And in my research phases, I have looked at other publishers who have, and when I say publishers, I don't mean of comics, I mean of anything that is tangible. And when I look at the comments from their audiences, especially if they're an old established brand, you have this kind of war of the worlds where you have some people like, oh, I can't believe you're jumping on the NFT bandwagon. You're bad people. It's all a scam and blah, blah, blah. And then you have the forces for good who are like, no, this really helps increase, the brand awareness or awareness of the product. And it really helps improve the creative space in so many ways. You get a lot more engagement. You're creating a better community. There's so many, there's a way to interact every one of those arguments, which it really does come down to one thing. A lot of the people who are naysayers in this space, they really just don't understand cryptocurrency. And hence that's the reason.
Exactly.
To be honest with you, that's why I wrote all these books. So we have like Meet Bob the Blockchain. We've got Crypto and Blockchain for Beginners.
Oh, I've seen that.
Yeah, that's ours. We've got the Beginner's Guide to Crypto Mining. I mean, you name it, we have it. And I've also just finished Beginner's Guide to AI. And now I'm going to do my last book for a long time, which is A Beginner's Guide to Quantum Computing. And the whole reason why I write all these things is to pretty much educate people. But, it's like with something where you have this like really established camp of people. And especially now that you do have the Encoded, but you also have, like we already said, a movie coming out, you're going to have a very wide range. You're going to have a buckshot spread of ages who you're talking to. You have a really good chance of educating people through your medium, through your art, through your comics on what the hell this crypto thing is. Because, no matter how big crypto is at the moment, you still have a hell of a lot of people who have no idea what we are talking about on a daily basis. And which is great, because that's the reason. It just means I have a hell of a lot more podcasts coming out, because that's the whole point of all this stuff. But you have a very different approach to education. And even it's a much more, ingrained approach, because the way that you're doing it, it seems like with the Encoded is I think quite gentle. I think it's a really good way to get people, hey, this is what we're doing. This is how we're getting into it. And I think what you're doing is pretty fantastic. So,
well, one is it's sort of deciding like, okay, we're still a lean and mean company, and this is still, it's hard enough to sell your books. It's always, promoting and selling your products, is the constant daily fight you're in, competing with people. So to add the burden on top of, now we're supposed to educate everyone, you have to find a happy medium where it's like, okay, we're going to work this into what we're already doing and make it cool, but we can still make it this accessible. If someone just wants to read the Encoded and doesn't care about crypto and is just going to dive to the, go to the end with the dollar or whatever, that's fine. They can read this as a fun sci-fi book. But if you're interested, it's there and the door is always open for you. And then if you want to go through that door, you're going to find out, oh, by the way, we're playing in this whole other world where we are doing some really cool, innovative stuff with crypto. And we're not trying to force crypto into comics in a way that's clunky. We're going to be utilizing the talents of comic book artists and the stories and all these capabilities, and find out where it makes sense. And so, like the clue with, just for example, I'll give away one of the clues on the Encoded. The first one is, the first block of cryptocurrency code ever mined was called the blank block. So people just know the name of the first.
Do you want me to say the answer, or should I just know?
I think I being on this podcast, most people know.
Well, no. The whole point of this podcast, we have a really widespread mix. So we have a lot of people who are long in the tooth. I happen to know that we have people from the SEC who listen to this podcast. I happen to know that we have the top blockchain projects who listen to this podcast. And we've also got people who literally this is like their first day, and they are just getting into crypto because they heard about it somewhere, and it could be, from the Encoded. I do know the answer. I'm not going to say it.
Long stuff. They don't know. It's the Genesis block.
Don't! So, I was going to say, don't say it. Don't say it. I was going to say, don't say it, because make them work for it. Because guess what? They would have bought the Encoded.
Well, no, they still have to go buy the book and do that, and they have to get the link and they have to know that so they can get the password to access the next page. Is going to give them the next clue.
It's so good.
So, that kind of thing. It's like, okay, that's just a simple little question to, answer. And if you're a crypto advocate or fan already, I think, just that makes the contest more fun, because you instantly just appreciate that we're telling people that. And then if you don't know, you don't even realize, like, oh, I just learned something cool about crypto, and now I'm getting this cool reward. And that's the way I think to start it. I'm working on a combination of things where in some cases we're going to start to, we're playing in the higher end, current trend of dropping some high profile art pieces, open sales and auctions, original NFT content that way. And then hopefully doing more collaborations with people known for comic art and people known for crypto art, merging them. That's been fun, because I'm getting comic book artists to work together who would have never work on a project together. It would just, their names are too big to they would never spend that much time working on the same project, but they can do a fun piece and can mint that and, and sell that. On the actual books, it's more about finding out what's going to be fun, entry-level stuff for the general readership to come into. So things like this contest, or things like maybe, every time we do a new print run, we're just going to start minting a certain amount of the books. Every issue, there's a certain amount minted. And then the stuff that we're really looking at is the ways to utilizing social tokens and access tokens. How can we set things up so that our fans are rewarded with those just for having supported us? Meanwhile, people are already doing that, and they want that stuff now. So it's like you sort of have to develop the thing for the current market, but we're really building it long-term for our readership to come in. And then when the world opens back up, we've got conventions. And when you talk about when people just throw around the word, the comic industry, that can mean a lot of things. That means the comic book shops that put books out every Wednesday. That means that can just mean the bookstores and the mass market that people send the graphic novels to. And that means conventions. And when it comes to conventions, that's like it's about the ticket sales are just about as significant as the book sales are. If you add in all of the money generated by the Comic-Cons prior to COVID, it was up to over $3 billion a year. And, there's not just San Diego Comic-Con and New York Comic-Con. These are all over the country. Many of them have 50, 60, 70,000 people. And when we get back into that, and we've got Web 3.0, and we've got AR, and we've got these tokens, there's going to be so many cool things we can do with comic book fandom. Right now we're minting on Ethereum. I want to have legitimate NFTs that are being actually able to be owned by the person, not trapped in some ecosphere.
I would buy, Devil's Due, DDC. I would buy Devil's Due crypto. I would easily buy that and buy your comics. And if it gave me also access to...
Yeah, just different tiers. Yeah, the Patreon model, Kickstarter model. I think this is why the crypto just made sense to me, because I was an early adopter to crowdfunding. We did Kickstarter back in 2012. There was a weird stigma about Kickstarter with comic book publishers, but creators were jumping onto it. And hell, actually, I always forget that I actually crowdfunded G.I. Joe, got the license, and then had no money from having paid for the license.
Yeah.
I had an old school website, taking the orders, wrote them down on a piece of paper, and kept them on a spreadsheet. And we just started taking subscription pre-orders. But now, we're doing a WeFunder campaign, and I've got a different company, Pop Cultivator, that is kind of really, the idea behind it was sort of structured years ago to be like a DAO.
Right.
But, it's an incubator and sort of a management company in a way that is filling in the gaps where this new disrupted space of creators having more power, but they still need some help. We've got this awesome team I've got a former Marvel editor, actually the guy that co-writes on the Encoded with me. I wrote the Bitcoin comic handbook, I wrote it 4 years ago. It came out about 3.5 years ago.
Oh, cool.
And it's, and I had been into crypto before that. So that was me making this book when I knew nobody in the comic shops was going to care. And I put it out anyway. I really just did it because it's I have to write this and get this out of my head. It also has the benefit of now no one can say oh, I just suddenly got into this because NFTs are popular, And I basically talking about NFTs in that book, but I didn't use the word NFT. I think even before that they were calling them, the idea of colored coins over the top of the Bitcoin blockchain. Mm-hmm. But the general concept's in there, and so fortunately I was pretty accurate on that stuff. And I could just hand that to people now and say, when everyone starts texting you when the price goes up, asking you about it, or when people start to argue about it, it's look, I've had this conversation before. Here's my book. Here's what I believe. Here's all the time I put into backing it up, and read that. And that's where we're working on.
This is one of the reasons I was very excited to talk to you, because my love of comics and my love of storytelling and my love for crypto, I've been thinking about this for the longest time on how this can actually explode through the cryptosphere. And I think you have such an untapped... Yeah, I honestly can just see it in my own head how it would all roll out. Well, for sure, you've got a great base product, and if you can actually now leverage the technology in tandem with that, I think you're unstoppable.
Well, there's we were stuck in this just molasses of progress for about 20 years, where it was still kind of sluggish as far as how the industry would change, some like problems with distribution and monopolies in the industry. And now, trying to get new, younger readers in was a problem. And, all the readers were like 35, 40 years old. And now kids comics are the biggest chunk of comics being read. The market's bigger than it's ever been.
Mm-hmm.
Manga, Japanese stuff, which is mostly like teenagers, has just slightly surpassed the kids stuff. And then and kids comics are actually some of the best-selling books in the world, let alone comics or graphic novels. And what we're on the cusp of is millions of new young adults and older teenagers coming in to read the medium of comics.
Yep.
Who are raised on it, who are going to have been sort of like burnt out on their like anime, and they're going to look for more stuff. And it's going to be just this huge tsunami of new readers coming in. And already, if you talk to any college class full of like comic book art students, they all read webtoons and they read their comics online, and they never really needed that comic shop culture to have a community that older people like myself really found as like a place to like go geek out, because they were able to do that online their whole life. And then they don't look at Comic Cons as a place to find the only other people that are into the same thing either. They look at Comic Cons more like a party, more like the way that people look at music festivals. It's just a way to go and get really into cosplay and all the costumes. And if you step back and look at kind of consciously aware, when I as a publisher or anybody in the industry is talking about these ideas, it's to say, let's first be very careful when we're talking about comics. What sort of part of this fandom are we talking about? If we're talking about the readers and the actual books and the actual comic medium, that at the end of the day still is people reading and appreciating the artwork, mm-hmm. and not interrupting it in a weird way, because the artwork doesn't work if it's interrupted the wrong way. But the collectability is a huge part of it. That's where crypto can really come in, and then giving an upgraded value to the book after you've read it, and then having it do things that on a whole other level. That's something that we can do. And then really getting into the experiences like Comic Cons. And I mean, imagine how cool your cosplay is going to be when if you're the kind of person that spends 3 weeks just building the coolest looking like robotic angel wings to add to this costume you're working on. What are you going to do when you can build that costume, and then on top of that you can spend another month rendering some amazing looking augmented reality thing, and so that when you're walking around the con, if anyone who's wearing the glasses sees your costume on a whole other level.
It's going to be amazing.
And yeah, or when, every kid that comes in the con, it's like, hey, do you want to be a minion? Here's your glasses. Now all the little kids are like minions if they want, if they want to wear this little badge or something that identifies them as that. That's the kind of stuff that when you talk about leaving people in the dust, that's the kind of things that I think are going to be fun to work on.
Well, I have to tell you, Josh, I'm really excited, and I really do plan on following everything that you are doing. You are incredibly talented. I have seen your work. It is exceptional, and I have a feeling the world is your oyster. And your NFTs, once they are released, I think they're going to go full guns.
Thank you very much. The biggest thing I'd say, just to stay tuned to follow me on Twitter at Josh Blaylock, and also I'm on Clubhouse at Josh Blaylock. And we're about to launch 2 new sites that are going to be doing special NFT releases, one for comics and one that is bringing together high-profile comic book artists, and another that you can view right now, thehotblocks.com, that is collaborating with people in the hip-hop space, bringing hip-hop talent together with comic book art talent.
That's amazing. All this creative stuff, everything that has to do with creativity and entertainment, people are really open for this, and especially marrying it with crypto, I think you're going to see a lot more people who are going to be coming to your space. Again, thank you so much for coming on, Josh. It's been a real pleasure for us to have you on to Crypto and Blockchain Talk.
Thank you very much.
Well, I want to just remind every one of our listeners that you can listen to these podcasts on a myriad of podcasting platforms. Please remember to tell your friends and family to listen to us, and you can find all of those different podcasting platforms that we are available on at cryptoandblockchaintalk.com. On top of that, these podcasts are streamed 24/7 around the world on Crypto 24 Radio. That's crypto24radio.com. In addition, you can contact us in a myriad of ways, one of them being on our social media channels, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. But we love to hear from you directly, so please do not hesitate and email us at education@savvydigital.com. That's education@savvy, SAVII, digital.com. Again, thank you for tuning in. We know you have a large number of podcasts that you can choose from, but the moment that you click onto ours and you're listening, you have no idea how much we truly appreciate you coming to us and really giving us your attention. I want you all to be safe, be well, and we'll see you soon.